He woke to silence, not the peaceful kind. This was heavy, oppressive, wrong. He lay in bed listening. No traffic, no distant sirens, nothing. He sat up, heart pounding. Something was wrong. He went to the window, looked out at his street, empty. Cars parked, but no movement. He saw a newspaper on a porch, untouched. He remembered the news last night, some kind of virus, spreading fast. He'd dismissed it then, not now. He went downstairs, fear crawling up his throat. He turned on the TV, static, radio the same. He picked up his phone, no signal. He was cut off, alone. The silence pressed in on him, suffocating. He had to know, he had to find someone, anyone. He started with his neighbors. He knocked, then tried the door, unlocked. He called out, his voice echoing in the unnatural stillness. No answer. He checked the other houses, a growing dread twisting in his gut. They were all empty. He drove, the silence almost deafening. Streets were deserted, traffic lights blinked meaninglessly. He drove to the city centre, hoping for some sign of life. He found chaos, cars abandoned in the middle of the road, some crashed, shops looted, their contents scattered. The air hung heavy with the stench of decay. He found a newspaper, its date yesterday's. The headlines screamed, "Pandemic decimates cities, millions feared dead." He sank to his knees, the paper fluttering to the ground. He was living a nightmare. The first 48 hours were a blur. He scavenged for food, water, supplies. He found refuge in an abandoned apartment, high enough to offer some security. He boarded up the windows, barricaded the door. He ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by nightmares. He tried to understand what had happened. How was he still alive? Where was everyone? He replayed the news reports in his head, searching for answers. He thought of his family, his friends. Were they out there somewhere, fighting for survival like him? Or were they... He couldn't bring himself to finish the thought. The silence was a constant torment. The absence of human voices, of laughter, of the everyday sounds of life was deafening. He craved human contact, a voice other than his own. The isolation was starting to eat at him, gnawing at his sanity. Survival became a daily battle. Food and water, once plentiful, were now precious commodities. He rationed carefully, aware that every meal could be his last. He ventured out cautiously, scavenging for supplies, always alert for danger. He learned to identify edible plants, to hunt small animals. He became resourceful, adapting to his new reality. The lack of electricity was a constant hardship. No lights, no refrigeration, no way to cook food. He learned to live without, to appreciate the simple things he had taken for granted. He found solace in books, in the written word. He read by candlelight, losing himself in stories of other worlds, other times. The hardest part was the loneliness. The silence was a living presence, a weight on his chest. He talked to himself just to hear a human voice. He sang, even though his voice sounded hoarse and unfamiliar. He yearned for connection, for someone, anyone, to share the burden of his existence. He started to see things, hear things. Shadows moved in the periphery of his vision. Whispers brushed against his ear. He knew it was his mind playing tricks on him, the product of isolation and fear. But it was hard to shake the feeling that he was being watched. He clung to the hope that he wasn't alone, that somewhere out there in the vast emptiness there were others like him, survivors of the plague. He dreamed of finding them, of rebuilding some semblance of a life from the ashes of the old. The world was changing. Without humans to maintain it, nature was reclaiming its domain. Plants grew wild, bursting through cracks in the pavement. Vines crawled up buildings, their tendrils reaching towards the sky. Animals, once confined to zoos and parks, roamed freely. The city, once a symbol of human achievement, was slowly being consumed by the natural world. Buildings crumbled, their facades cracked and overgrown. Roads were disappearing under a carpet of weeds and wildflowers. The air, once thick with pollution, was now clear and sweet. He found a strange beauty in the decay, a sense of peace in the face of annihilation. It was as if the earth was healing itself, purging itself of the human infestation that had plagued it for so long. One day, while scavenging in a deserted electronics store, he found a ham radio. It was old, battered, but it might still work. He spent days cleaning it, repairing it, clinging to it like a lifeline. He finally managed to get it working, the static a symphony to his ears, and then a voice, faint, crackling, but undeniably human. He nearly wept with relief. He wasn't alone. He responded, his voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. The voice answered back, a woman. She was alive out there somewhere. He learned her name was Sarah. She was in a small town miles away. She was alone like him. They talked for hours, sharing their stories, their fears, their hopes. The sound of her voice, even distorted by static, was a balm to his soul. He set out the next day, determined to find her. The journey was long and perilous, filled with unknown dangers. But he was driven by a newfound purpose. He was no longer just surviving. He had something to live for. He didn't know if he would find her, if she was even still alive. But he had to try. He had to believe that somewhere in the ruins of this world there was still a chance for connection, for love, for a future. The silence no longer held the same terror. It was now filled with the faintest glimmer of hope, the hope that he might not be the last human on Earth. And even if he was, he would keep fighting, he would keep searching, because that's what humans do, they survive.